Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the unconscious, the consciousness, and dreams, which is such a fun chapter because you got to ask the question, who is really driving the car? How much of you is motivating yourself, your conscious mind, and how much of you is driven by your unconscious mind? Ooh. I like this chapter a lot because again, it just really gets you wondering, how much of you is driven by your biology, the release of hormones telling your brain that to go find food, to go find warmth and sex and attachments to other people. And how much of you is your conscious decision making, your cognitions, your thoughts. You're putting everything together. You're making the decisions for yourself. And this iceberg is a perfect example of what it's really like. Everything underneath the water, that's your unconscious mind. And above the water, that's your conscious mind. So again, the majority of what's going on with you is unconscious. And what's even cooler is your unconscious has so much power over you that it can put you to sleep. So it's a really fun chapter. Really, again, who is driving the car? Who is driving you? So think about the last time you went driving. Were you paying attention the entire time? And when you weren't paying attention, who was driving the car? So, when are you conscious? Okay? Who is really in control? Your conscious mind or your unconscious mind? And as you're going to find, the unconscious is way, at least, if you look at it in football terms, they've had the ball the most. Your unconscious has it the longest, okay? Why do we talk to ourselves? Come on, guys, think about that conversation you're having in your head. Your id, your inner self, talking to your super ego, your social self, and then your ego somewhere in the middle. Why do you have self talk? What's going on? So, again, consciousness is split. Okay, you have your unconscious mind, and then you have your conscious mind. Put the conscious and the unconscious together, and you have the mind. But again, throughout this whole chapter, and hopefully for the rest of the class, you should be asking yourself how much of you is driven by your biology, how much of you is driven by brain structure, how much of you is driven by cognition, and how much of you is driven by the social context, the influence of others, the socialization process, culture. All right. So, defining consciousness. Does anyone actually know what consciousness is? No. This is just one of those chapters where, we have some ideas, but again, all you are essentially is just neurons releasing neurotransmitters. So, do we know what consciousness is? No. Okay. But I like to simply call it awareness. So, when I think of consciousness, I'm thinking that's your aware you. Your unconsciousness, that's your unaware you. So, whenever you're aware, whenever you're focused, whenever you're thinking, that's your consciousness. When you're asleep, when you're dreaming, all the other unconscious processes, okay? That's all going on beneath the surface. But what's the purpose of consciousness is a really good evolutionary psychological question because you're asking, well, why does our sense of awareness, why did that develop over time? Why is that an evolutionary adaptation? But again, your ability to perceive things, to make sense of your senses, and then consciously reflect upon what's going on in the environment is arguably something that adds to the survival of the species because we can anticipate, we can consider, we can think about what's going on, and then we can make decisions. And we can do all of that consciously, okay? So the consciousness is the subjective awareness of oneself and the environment. And the usefulness of this is we can reflect upon the environment, which focuses our attention and enables us to better perceive what is happening, to become more aware of what is happening. And as you get older, you probably can tell this, right? As your frontal cortex develops more, you make better judgments, you're able to interpret information better, you have more knowledge to work from, your perception becomes more acute, and so these are the advances of, growing up and no longer being a teenager anymore. Because I have a teenager right now. Is he making the best decisions? Well, probably not, because his conscious mind is not totally as developed as it's going to be when he's 25. So, degrees of consciousness. Think about when you're riding a bike. Are you really paying attention to everything you're doing? Are you actually telling your right leg to move and then telling your left leg to move? Right leg, left leg, right? Who's doing that? All you're thinking about is direction. Like, am I going to hit anything? No. Am I good? Yeah. But your body is doing all those movements. You're not consciously telling your body to move. When you're walking, do you ever actually really think about when you're walking? The only time you think about walking is when you're on unsafe ground, like it's icy. If it's really icy, all of a sudden you're like really paying attention to how you're walking. But otherwise, you don't think about it, you just walk. Same thing with driving a car. You're not really conscious every moment you're in a car, especially when you're on a long road trip, listen to music. Okay, so consciousness is not linear. It's not like you wake up and you're conscious and then you go to bed and you're unconscious. That's not accurate. You are conscious at moments throughout the day. You're not constantly conscious. Throughout most of the day, all those body movements, all the things you're doing, that's all your unconscious mind doing all that for you. But throughout the day, you do have these states of consciousness, these states of awareness, okay? So are you conscious all the time? No. Again, it comes in like little series. Okay? A couple minutes out of every hour. So cognitive science, this is studying your behavior, your thoughts, and the brain. Okay? The brain structure. So neuroscience, again, the brain structure. Cognitive, looking at cognition, the way you think. Put them together, you have cognitive neuroscience. We're studying the brain related to cognition, perception, thinking, memory, language. Okay? Uh, Minsky quotes this: the mind is what the brain does. So, again, your mind is limited by the structure of the brain and the function of the brain. Same thing with consciousness, it's limited by our biology. It serves a biological purpose, and our consciousness exists within that realm. Okay? From an evolutionary approach, again, consciousness is an evolutionary adaptation that increases our survivals and overall outcomes. Okay? So, how is it that we are able to take in sensation, make sense of the perception, to perceive that sensation, to make sense of it, to understand your reality? How is all that mixed in with, fear and emotion and things that you like and things that you dislike, for example? Okay? So different parts of the brain are associated with different aspects of these processes. Okay? So our, interpretations for food and music and words and all these things, they all exist on different parts of their brain. And so whenever you're doing these specific activities, that's when you see that brain and those parts light up. Okay? So when you guys are receiving sensation, okay, this information, what your unconscious wants you to think about, this stuff gets sent to your consciousness to then focus on and be aware. So again, your body is constantly, receiving signals about the air. But your body's not going to tell your consciousness, your unconscious isn't going to tell your consciousness to think about the air until all of a sudden it's really high winds and there's a hurricane. And oh my God, we better run, for example. I also like to think about the mosquito analogy. A mosquito lands on you. You guys don't know it's on you until your unconscious mind tells your consciousness. Your unconsciousness doesn't know it's on you until enough neurons fire from that area in your arm to tell you that the mosquito is biting you. And then once enough neurons have fired, crossed into your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind decides to tell you there's a mosquito, that mosquito's already been there for a few seconds. And then when you go to swat at the mosquito and kill it, yeah, you might be able to kill it, but he's also already made the bite. Because again, there's that little bit of delay from the sensation going from your arm, stimulating neurons, talking to your unconscious mind, which then goes and talks to your conscious mind. Okay? So the things that enter your consciousness, you have to have enough neurons, enough stimuli to send that information to your consciousness. Hence the classic subliminal messages in grocery stores where they used to have sounds that were below what your conscious, which below that threshold that enough neurons are firing to tell your consciousness you're hearing stuff. So you were unconsciously hearing things in the grocery store, but it wasn't loud enough to send enough neurons to get your unconsciousness to tell your consciousness to think about it. And that's how subliminal messages work, okay? So again, for your conscious mind to process it, to actually think about it in the first place, requires a bunch of neurons to be sent to the consciousness and say, hey, think about this stuff, okay? All right, so again, we have very selective attention. We focus our consciousness upon a specific stimuli when our unconscious mind tells us to focus on that stimuli. However, we are very limited. You and I can only think about one thing at a time with our conscious mind. Our unconscious mind can be driving the car while we're thinking about some other stuff. Okay, but your consciousness can't drive the car and think at the same time. You can drive the car, then once you stop driving the car, your unconsciousness takes over and you can think about something different. Okay, so can you think about more than one thing at a time? Unconsciously, yeah, but consciously, no, you're limited. This is the cocktail party effect. Go to a party, stand in the middle of the room, and try to pick out a conversation. And chances are you're not going to be able to pick up what anybody's saying because there's so much noise going around you that until you get closer and you get enough neurons that it can make sense to your consciousness, all you're going to hear is jibber jabber from all around you. Okay? Texting and driving is really bad, and talking on the phone is very bad for all these reasons because your brain, your conscious mind that is driving the actual car. If the second you start looking at your cell phone, you're no longer consciously driving the car. Now it's just your unconscious mind driving the car. Okay, but you need your consciousness to really reflect on what's happening in the environment while you're driving. Therefore, it's not good to distract yourself from driving because less brain activity is going to the area of driving. So here's what happens. When you're driving a car, you have all this brain activity going to the driving part of your brain. Once you start talking on a cell phone, part of that brain activity then gets sent to the cell phone. So now less of your brain activity is being spent driving and more of it's on the cell phone. The second you start texting, almost no brain activity is going to driving anymore. You pretty much stop driving the car. Therefore, talking on the phone, the amount of brain activity you're spending toward driving is the same amount of brain activity that would be going on if you're drunk driving when your thinking is impaired because your synapses are not reuptaking neurotransmitters, which is slowing down the transmission. So when you're talking on the phone, it's the same thing as drunk driving because you're no longer paying any conscious attention to the road. Texting on the phone is like 4 times worse than that. You are 23 times more likely to get in a car accident when you're texting because your brain essentially stops driving. There's no more brain activity. You almost forget that you're driving. Your unconscious mind starts again, and your consciousness starts focusing on your phone. So don't talk on the phone or text and drive. It's very dangerous. Okay? So we all have intentional blindness. And this is a really fun video. So guys, after this, I want you guys to watch these. But for this experiment, what it is someone walks up to someone randomly and says, "Hey, can you tell me how to get somewhere?" And they put a map in front of their face. Okay? Then out of nowhere, a new person will come in and just switch with that person, and that person won't even notice like 40% of the time. This one down here, this one asks you to follow the basketball and how many times they passed it, but the whole time there's something going on in the middle that you never see. So I need you guys to watch both of these videos that are in this PowerPoint because this one's hilarious, okay? I don't want to ruin it for you right now because I don't want to prime you for when you go to watch it. It's better if you watch it having never seen it before so that you can be as shocked as everybody else that watches that. So make sure you guys watch those 2 videos. So again, you have a 2-track mind. You have an unconscious processing and you have consciousness processing, okay? Information is processed on both conscious and unconscious levels. Okay, you learn unconsciously all the time. You absorb information and you might not consciously be trying to memorize it, but you still know. Think about it. Think about the school that you guys go to. What color is the school? You know the color of the school, even if you've never consciously tried to memorize it because your unconscious mind memorized it for you. So again, your unconsciousness is memorizing all kinds of stuff for you, taking in information, gathering knowledge, arranging, sensations to, categorize that and to make sense of what's going on. Okay? Um, the bird flying, this is, all of you guys are aware of what you see is a bird, but you might not know what type of bird it is. Again, so what led you to the decision to decide what kind of a bird and what kind of a bird it is a really interesting question. Okay, so essentially your brain works off stage. Okay, this means that your unconscious mind is doing all kinds of stuff for you. Okay, And cognition operates again on two levels, unconscious and conscious. So you can think of conscious awareness as deliberate thinking and unconscious as automatic thinking. Okay, parallel processing, that's what your unconscious does, and sequential processing, that's what your consciousness does. Again, you can take in tons of information, but you can't consciously process all that. You can only process like one thing at a time. Okay? Sleep and dreams are something that students actually end up loving this part of it more than anything in the class. I don't know what it is about dreams. Essentially, we don't know anything about dreams, guys. We have a bunch of guesses. Okay, but we don't totally understand why you dream. There's a lot of theories which we're going to talk about. So, sleep, here's how it works. Your unconscious mind puts you to sleep. It's incredible how your unconscious mind can paralyze you and put you to sleep. Okay? Even when you're asleep, your unconsciousness is still processing information from the environment. Okay, so it's not like just because you're asleep, you can't hear anything anymore. Okay, it's just that your body has paralyzed your mind, your unconscious has paralyzed your body and your consciousness to rest for whatever reasons that we need to rest. Okay, whether it's for memory and cognition, because that's when you code all your memories. Okay, um, or whether it's because your body needs rest, you need to reset, you need to regenerate, whatever it is. But we all have that natural circadian rhythm of when we wake up and when we go to sleep. Our circadian rhythm is influenced again by evolutionary adaptations, in that humans have adapted to not be nocturnal animals. We are daytime animals, but that's also we have color vision. That's why we have color vision. Most of our vision, our strongest neural pathways go from our color vision, and so we need light to be able to do that. Again, being awake in the day that's part of the human consciousness. Okay, that's part of the human evolution. Okay, so when you're awake, you have your brain. When you're awake, you have alpha waves, and when you're asleep, you get these delta waves. So when you're going to sleep, your brain stops transmitting alpha waves and turns on delta waves to put you to sleep. Okay? So wavelengths are responsible for putting you to sleep. Again, very complex. No one really understands sleep and dreams. It's all new stuff that we're learning about over time. Okay? But we all have about 90-minute sleep cycles from beginning to end. Wake up for a second, beginning to end. Okay? There's several stages of sleep, so REM is not the only stage of sleep. REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, is not the only time you dream either. You dream during all the phases of sleeping. It's just during rapid eye movement, that's when you tend to have the most intense dreams, okay? So, your heartbeat rises after your body paralyzes you, breathing becomes irregular, you start to dream, you become sexually aroused, muscles relax, brain activity increases, the body becomes paralyzed. Okay, this is because your unconscious releases delta waves to put you to sleep, and then when it wants you to wake up, it again starts signaling the alpha waves. Okay, so again, why do we sleep? Protection, recuperation, restoring, building memories, helps thinking and learning. Physical growth occurs when you're asleep. Okay, not getting enough sleep is associated with psychological distress, including depression, low energy, downed emotional states, weight gain. We Sleep disorders are absolutely fascinating. I'm not sure if you guys are, if you are into that kind of thing, but it's definitely worth looking into. Insomnia, the inability to sleep, narcolepsy when your just brain puts you to sleep randomly, sleep apnea when your heart stops for a second, night terrors, sleepwalking, sleep talking. All right. So dreams are sequences of images, emotions, and thoughts in the mind of a sleeping person. Okay? Dreams and REM stages are all associated with dreams. You dream during all the phases of sleep. Okay? So again, your unconsciousness is monitoring the environment. Okay? Freud's theories of dreams, you have manifest content, your brain creating storylines, latent content, your unconscious desires coming out. Okay? Thought that dreams reduce inner conflict and discharge unacceptable feelings. It's like when you work out all of that stuff is when you're sleeping. Cognitive theory of dreams. That's again, it enables information processing. This is when you code your information. It's when you code your memories. Reflecting, storing of information as you cycle through the day, developing neural pathways. This is why babies sleep more. Because again, babies need more time to process all that information and then synthesize all these sensations that occurred that day into a story, for example, to code information into schemas of knowledge. Interrupted sleep reduces memory. So again, when you're going to take an exam, it's very, very important that you guys get sleep, because if you study, then sleep, your brain has more time to encode that information for later retrieval. Okay? So drugs do affect consciousness essentially because they're affecting the way the brain works, and most of them affect the way that neurotransmitters work essentially. So some drugs increase neurotransmitters, so that's what you see here. Lots of neurotransmitters, okay? And then some drugs slow down neurotransmitters, like alcohol blocks the reuptake. So drugs either create or tell more neurotransmitters to be released, or they block the reuptake of neurotransmitters on the next neuron. Okay? So psychoactive drugs affect our perceptions and moods because they affect neurotransmitters. Some again block reuptake, and so extra neurotransmitters are in the synapse, which causes you to feel high. Depressants slow down brain activity because it slows down the reuptake of neurotransmitters. Stimulants increase the body's release of neurotransmitters, but also block your reuptake. Hallucinogens distort perceptions and invoke images. Okay, so why do people use drugs? Drug use is associated with your genetics, it's associated with cognition, it's also associated with the social cultural environment, hence the biopsychosocial approach. Okay, so when you guys think about drug use, again, it's the whole factor. Are people using drugs because of their genetics? Are they using drugs because of their thoughts? Or are they using drugs because they're in poverty? Because, does drug use increase with poverty? Absolutely. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please email with any questions and have a wonderful day.